lost you on this job. And I don't think that guy is like a bad guy. I think he's just disorganized. You're inadvertently running a Ponzi scheme.
I see now why people do that. Short thing, we're obviously a general contracting company. We mostly work with, of course, we work with agents, homeowners, things like that, investors. Right now, we're working with a lot of out-of-state investors. I think that's kind of our niche right now. We provide the most value that way, right?
Yeah.
When they're in state, they don't need as much project management, things like that. So we started, I was a flipper and buying rentals back in the day. I started in 2019 buying rentals, started flipping, doing that whole thing, and learned the beautiful ups and downs of this business, right? Mm-hmm. And so I just love networking. I love meeting people, right? I always tell people, any industry you're in, once you're in it, it's a small world. People know people, whether, if it's not, not directly, there's someone, mutual acquaintances. So that's what I love about business. I love getting to know people. I love just doing the thing, whatever industry that is, getting good at it, and just making friends who eventually become peers and colleagues, right?
Yeah.
In the business. So we started, doing the whole flipping thing, and then kind of started pivoting. I had a couple other co-owners at the beginning. Do you know the Rickies? Tyler Ricky? Mm-hmm. Shout out to the Ricky boys.
Yeah. So I'm trying to get Tyler to come on the show, actually.
Yeah, he's in Thailand.
I was going to say, he's out in like Southeast Asia.
Yeah,
so.
Living the life. I'm happy for him. So I met him in 2018, just, DMing on Instagram, became great friends. And then, I love business. I like, creating things. I like, just kind of forming my own path, right? And, me and Tyler were just kind of pushing ideas around with each other. And we were in the hot tub one day. He's like, let's start a company. And I was like, you know what? I would love that. So let's do it. So, we started doing our thing, leaning on our little circle we've got, from knowing wholesalers, agents, right? Anyone in the business, and just kind of started spreading the word, and first and foremost, providing value for people, whether, doesn't matter what you are, investor, a homeowner, whatever, we just want to provide value. So, that's one thing I always kind of lead with people is like, hey, even if we don't end up doing this, I'll give you a quote, obviously no pressure on that. Even if we don't end up doing it, how can I provide you value? Whether it's, do you need an inspector? Do you need a hard money lender? Do you need a good agent, right? So I love to just kind of provide value, linking people up with what they need, and just, making sure everyone I can help, in any way. That's kind of long story of it. So, now we're about 18 months, or I'd say 17 months into Investor Price Services, having a ton of luck, or ton of success, and a little bit of luck, right? Mm-hmm. And it's going really well. And I really am getting more and more clarity as it goes on, especially from being a flipper originally. I'm like, this is where I'd like to be, It's one of those things, it's like such an easy business if you just do what you'll say you're going to do and do it well, right? And have great communication, right? I mean, we're not asking for much these days when you're working with people, right? Do what you say, do it well, and communicate. So, if you can do all of those, in especially real estate, you're going to do well. So we're seeing that. And now, we're just taking it seriously and really looking at the internal, organization and how we can be better and provide better services for our clients, right? And grow as well, So that's why I'm honored to be here. It means a lot. I know you guys do a bunch of really great work, and you're obviously very organized, which I admire from someone who's kind of a, figure it out as you go kind of guy. So
good. The facade is holding up.
Oh yeah, it looks great from the outside. I like it. And to the inside, up in the studio. Yeah, you guys are doing well. So I appreciate that I'm even considered to be here with you guys, because I do see you doing a lot of good things and doing it well.
I mean, since we kind of first linked up and had coffee together the first time, I found you to be just like a really great individual to talk to, because you have had this, I always appreciate a multi-perspective kind of viewpoint on the real estate industry. So like having been an investor yourself, and now you run a general contracting business. Mm-hmm. I always, and not to knock anybody who's like focused on one thing, but so many of the perspectives you hear, most of them are pretty one-dimensional, where it's like, I'm a realtor, I sell real estate. That's all I do. Mm-hmm. And that's all I do. And or like I'm a contractor, but I don't really invest myself. I just, I'm happy to, just let you pay me to do work on your property. And sometimes those like perspectives I feel like get a little
narrow.
Yeah, a little narrow, and then it's like it ends up creating sometimes those collaborations, there's more potential for conflict because it's harder to understand the perspective on the other side. So actually that's kind of the question I want to ask you is like, having been an investor yourself and now, you said like 18 months into owning a contracting business, like what's something that you really learned like from the contractor perspective of like, oh, I wish more investors kind of understood like this from a contractor's perspective?
Well, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is our red flags. We'll think about other positive things, but just, I mean, understanding even red flags and how contractors work. Everyone knows how they were robbing Peter to pay Paul kind of thing, you know? So now that I'm in the business, I can see how easy that can be, for a contracting company. A lot of people, their whole model is just like get deposits and I'll get to you when I get to you,
Yeah.
And I mean, I literally just took over a job 2 weeks or about a week ago. We quoted it 6 months ago. Guy hired another crew for less. After all the change orders, oh my gosh, he was within like $2,000. I think even $1,000 of our original quote after this guy's change order. Now he's gone. Guy lost 20 grand, and we're taking over the project. But to kind of bring that back to is just. And I tell this to people, like, no matter how good of a person they are, like a contractor, right? I've had some that you work for years with, and then they just fall apart, whatever it is, financially, whatever. Even if they're a good person, you got to like understand who you're working with and how they're doing with their business, how they're running their business. Are they just collecting deposits? And so obviously this is easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
Are they just collecting deposits, getting to the next one, and then you're in line or what, whatever like that. So I just know that, you just gotta just keep that into account, when you're working with contractors. Like they could be good today, but not good tomorrow. So you need to be keeping an eye, like how are they doing financially, things like that. Like you'll know, right, working with people if they're stressed out, things like that. But just kind of that's one thing I've learned, and so one thing we do to eliminate that is we have separate bank accounts for deposits and things like that, and then payroll, and then profit margins, and then taxes. We have a different account for all that, so it's not commingled, right? Because then you're just doing all this backup bookkeeping, trying to make sure your cash flow, you're monitoring cash flow in one account with all these different things going on.
It's a lot.
It's a mess. It's a mess. So that's why we're trying to bring some of that professional acumen to the structure of how we're working, right? So we can avoid those things, because you can see it's an easy thing to get into. I was doing my cash flow analysis this morning. And I got money coming in at the end of the week. I got some next week, but it's, it can get a little thin, and you got to make sure you're doing the right things. And of course, then you got to make sure you're paying people on time. So it's kind of a long roundabout, answer to your question. But
I think that's a great one to highlight. It's something I think we've experienced plenty of times on the, sort of the client side of it, of contractors, like you said, contractors we've worked with for years who are great for years. And then all of a sudden it's just, hey, what happened? Like we just lost you on this job. And I think that is an important distinction. And that like matches my experience. I've built personal relationships with many contractors that unfortunately it's like, we don't work with today. And it's because, something kind of ended up happening. And I still to this day, even though it's like from a business standpoint, had to like kind of sever ties. It was still like, I don't think that guy is like a bad guy. I think he's just disorganized. Yeah. Like he just, and that makes that robbing Peter to pay Paul, keeping your accounting like siloed from like one project to another. So many contractors that are talented at what they do in terms of like the renovation and the actual skill set involved in it. They're not accountants. Like they didn't want to be. That's not why they got into the business. Like
they're swinging hammers.
Yeah, they want to swing hammers, and that accounting side of it. Like, so, I feel like it is the ruin of a lot of contractors, where you just end up in that situation where I call it like you're inadvertently running a Ponzi scheme. Like,
It can happen. Yeah, and I've just that was a realization I had within the last week. Like we had the stuff siloed out beforehand because we had a business coach who told us to, right? And that's what, gave us a good heads up on things like that. But I saw it firsthand. I was reflecting on it. I was like, oh, I see now why people do that, and especially after I took over that job for them. But so That's been one thing I've learned.
You can check out our full library of episodes wherever you get your podcasts.